The horse's hooves thundered against the mud-soaked earth as Irving spotted the pale hand breaking through the churning waters of the Yellowstone River. And without a second thought, he spurred his mare forward into the deadly current. Montana Territory in 1878 was unforgiving, especially during spring when the snowmelt turned gentle streams into raging torrents. The woman's dark hair fanned out around her like seaweed as the water pulled her under again, and Russell kicked free of his stirrups, diving from the saddle into the icy embrace of the river. The cold hit him like a physical blow, stealing the breath from his lungs. He fought against the current, his arms cutting through the water with powerful strokes born from years of swimming in these very waters as a boy. His fingers closed around fabric, then flesh, and he hauled the woman against his chest. She was limp, her lips already tinged blue, but he could feel the faint flutter of her heartbeat against his own racing pulse. Getting them both to shore took every ounce of strength Russell possessed. The current wanted to drag them downstream, wanted to pull them under and add 2 more souls to the river's collection. His boots finally found purchase on the rocky bottom, and he staggered forward, carrying the woman in his arms. His mare, bless her loyal heart, had made it to the bank and stood waiting, her sides heaving. Russell laid the woman on the grass and pressed his ear to her chest. The heartbeat was there, but weak, and water gurgled in her lungs. He'd seen men drown before, pulled from rivers and creeks too late to save. He wouldn't let that happen now. Rolling her onto her side, he struck her back firmly between the shoulder blades. Once, twice, 3 times. Water poured from her mouth and she convulsed, coughing and choking, her body instinctively fighting for air. "That's it," Russell murmured, supporting her as she gasped and sputtered. "Come on now, breathe. Just breathe." Her eyes flew open, wide and terrified, the color of amber in sunlight. She tried to speak, but could only cough more water, her whole body trembling violently. Russell shrugged out of his heavy coat, soaked though it was, and wrapped it around her shoulders. They needed to get warm and dry and fast. The nearest town was Deer Lodge, about 5 miles south, but there was an old line shack closer, maybe 2 miles west. He'd used it before during cattle drives. "Can you hear me?" Russell asked, pushing wet strands of dark hair from her face. She was young, probably in her early 20s, with delicate features and skin that had seen sun but not the weathering of years on the range. "I'm going to get you somewhere warm. You're going to be all right." She nodded weakly, her teeth chattering too hard for speech. Russell lifted her as gently as he could and managed to get her situated on his mare. He swung up behind her, keeping one arm locked around her waist to hold her upright. She slumped against him, and he could feel the cold radiating from her body even through their wet clothes. The ride to the line shack felt like it took hours instead of the 30 minutes it actually required. Russell kept talking to her, nonsense mostly, just trying to keep her conscious. She didn't respond, but her head would occasionally move, letting him know she could still hear him. His own teeth had started chattering by the time the weathered cabin came into view, its rough-hewn logs gray with age but the structure still sound. Russell half carried, half dragged the woman inside. The shack was simple, just one room with a stone fireplace, a rough-built bunk against one wall, and a few supplies he and other cowboys kept stocked for emergencies. Most importantly, there was dry wood stacked beside the hearth and matches in a tin on the mantel. His fingers were so numb he could barely strike the match, but he managed to get a fire going. The kindling caught, then the larger logs and blessed warmth began to fill the small space. He turned back to the woman, who had collapsed onto the floor just inside the door, still wrapped in his coat. "We need to get you out of those wet clothes," Russell said, then felt his face heat despite the cold. I'll turn my back. There's blankets on the bunk. Wrap yourself up. She looked at him with those amber eyes, awareness slowly returning to them, and nodded. Russell busied himself with adding more wood to the fire and stripping off his own soaked shirt and vest. He wrung them out as best he could and draped them near the hearth. His undershirt was damp but not soaked through, so he kept it on for modesty's sake. Behind him, he could hear the rustle of fabric and the woman's labored breathing. "All right," she finally whispered, her voice hoarse and raw. Russell turned to find her cocooned in both blankets from the bunk, sitting on the floor near the fire. Her wet clothes lay in a sodden heap beside her. He scooped them up and found places to hang them to dry, trying not to notice the fine quality of the fabric, or the fact that her dress had more buttons and layers than any practical frontier woman would wear. "Thank you," she said softly, pulling the blankets tighter around herself. "You saved my life." "What were you doing in the river?" Russell asked, crouching down across the fire from her. Now that the immediate crisis had passed, questions crowded his mind. "Did you fall from the road?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I jumped." The words hit Russell like a physical blow. He'd assumed an accident, a wagon mishap, a spooked horse. "You jumped," he repeated. "You tried to." "No," she said quickly, looking up at him with those striking eyes. "No, not like that. I was running away. There was a stagecoach and men following us, and everything happened so fast. The driver told me to jump into the river, said it was my only chance. I thought he was mad, but then I heard gunshots and he pushed me and I fell." Her voice broke on the last word. Russell's jaw tightened. "Outlaws. Worse," she said bitterly. "My father's men. He sent them to bring me back to Philadelphia. I was trying to make it to San Francisco to my aunt. She's the only family who ever understood that I needed to live my own life, make my own choices." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I suppose that worked out well." "What's your name?" Russell asked gently. "Amanda," she said after a brief hesitation. "Amanda Foster. And I already know yours. You told me about 6 dozen times while we were riding here. Russell Irving, born and raised in Montana Territory, raised by your uncle after your parents died of fever, and you think your mare is the finest horse in the entire Northwest. Did I miss anything?" Despite everything, Russell felt a smile tug at his lips. "You were listening." "Hard not to when someone's shouting in your ear to stay awake," Amanda said, but her tone was gentle, even grateful. She shifted the blankets and winced. "Are you hurt?" Russell moved closer instinctively. "Just bruised, I think. The river wasn't kind." She held out her hands, showing scraped palms and scratched forearms. There was a nasty bruise forming on her left cheekbone, probably from striking a rock. Russell retrieved his saddlebags from where he'd dropped them by the door. Among his supplies, he had a small tin of salve that worked on everything from rope burns to saddle sores. "May I?" he asked, holding it up. Amanda nodded, extending her hands. Russell settled beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance, and gently applied the salve to her wounds. Her hands were small in his, the bones delicate, the skin soft despite the recent abuse from the river. These were not the hands of a woman used to hard labor. Everything about Amanda Foster spoke of wealth and privilege, from her refined speech to the quality of her clothing drying by the fire. "Why run?" Russell asked as he worked. "Your father must care about you to send men all this way." Amanda's laugh was sharp and bitter. "He cares about his business arrangements. I'm 22 years old, and he's decided I should marry Cyrus Worthington, a man of 45 who's already buried 2 wives. But Cyrus owns half the railroads in Pennsylvania, so my preferences don't matter." She pulled her hands back, wrapping the blankets tighter again. I won't be sold like property. I'd rather die free than live in a gilded cage." The fierce determination in her voice stirred something in Russell's chest. He'd always lived free, made his own choices, gone where he pleased. The idea of being forced into a life not of your choosing felt fundamentally wrong. "They'll still be looking for you," he said. "If they find you here, then I'll run again," Amanda said firmly. "Or find another river to jump into, though I'd prefer to avoid that if possible." "Your Montana rivers are absolutely freezing." "That they are," Russell agreed. He stood and checked their clothes. His were starting to dry, but Amanda's dress with all its layers would take much longer. "We should stay here tonight. It's not safe to travel in the dark and you need rest. Come morning we can head into Deer Lodge. It's the nearest town of any size. Won't people ask questions? A woman traveling with a man, no chaperone, wearing his coat." Amanda's tone was wry, but Russell could see the worry in her eyes. "We'll say you're my cousin from back east, come to visit," Russell said. "Montana territory isn't as fussy about such things as Philadelphia probably is, but we'll keep it proper. I'll find you lodging at the boarding house, make sure you're safe." "And then what?" Amanda asked softly. "Your uncle will wonder where you've been. People will want to know my story. How long before word gets back to my father's men?" She was right, of course. Russell moved to the small shelf that held emergency supplies and found 2 tins of beans and a dented pot. "Not much of a dinner, but it would do." "We'll figure it out," he said, more confidently than he felt. "One problem at a time. First we eat, then we sleep. Tomorrow we plan." Amanda watched as he prepared their meager meal, heating the beans over the fire. The shack had no proper cookware, so they ate straight from the pot, passing it back and forth between them. It should have been awkward, this forced intimacy with a complete stranger, but somehow it wasn't. Perhaps nearly dying together created a bond that normal social conventions couldn't account for. "Tell me about Deer Lodge," Amanda said between bites. "What's it like?" "Small but growing," Russell said. "Got a main street with a general store, a bank, a couple saloons, a church, and a boarding house run by Mrs. Henderson. She's a good woman, fair and honest. The town's mostly miners and ranchers, folks who work hard and mind their own business. Nothing like Philadelphia, I imagine." "That sounds perfect," Amanda said wistfully. She handed the pot back to him. "I've spent my whole life in drawing rooms and ballrooms, making polite conversation about nothing important. I want to see mountains and rivers. I want to breathe air that hasn't been choked with coal smoke. I want to matter, to do something real with my life." "You might find Montana a bit rougher than you're expecting," Russell warned. "It's beautiful, sure, but it's also hard. Winters that'll freeze you solid if you're not prepared. Summers so hot the grass turns brown. And people who aren't always kind to strangers." "I'm tougher than I look," Amanda said, lifting her chin. "I survived the river, didn't I?" "That you did," Russell agreed. He set the empty pot aside and added another log to the fire. "You should sleep. Take the bunk." "I'll keep the fire going and keep watch." "Keep watch for what?" Amanda asked, but she was already moving toward the bunk, exhaustion evident in every movement. "Bears, wolves, the usual," Russell said lightly, not mentioning that he'd also be watching for riders, for men who might have tracked them here. He didn't think Amanda's father's hired men could have followed the river this far, not in the dark, but he hadn't survived this long by being careless. Amanda settled onto the bunk, still wrapped in her blankets. Within minutes, her breathing had deepened into sleep. Russell sat by the fire, his rifle across his knees, and thought about the strange turn his day had taken. He'd ridden out this morning to check on strays from his uncle's herd, expecting nothing more interesting than maybe finding a calf caught in brush. Instead, he'd pulled a desperate woman from the Yellowstone River, and was now sitting guard over her like some knight from the stories his mother used to read to him before the fever took her. Amanda Foster was trouble. There was no denying that. She was beautiful, educated, refined, everything Russell wasn't. She was also brave and determined and completely out of her depth in this wild country. The smart thing would be to deliver her to Mrs. Henderson's boarding house tomorrow and wash his hands of the whole affair. Let her figure out her own path, solve her own problems. But even as he thought it, Russell knew he wouldn't do that. Maybe it was the way she'd looked at him when she spoke about wanting to be free. Maybe it was the fierce light in her amber eyes when she'd said she'd rather die than be forced into marriage. Or maybe it was simply that for the first time in the 3 years since his uncle's wife had passed, leaving just the two of them rattling around the ranch house, Russell didn't feel quite so alone. The night passed slowly. Russell dozed occasionally but never deeply, always aware of the sounds outside the shack and the soft breathing of the woman on the bunk. He thought about his life, the pattern of days that had become so familiar he barely noticed them anymore. Wake before dawn, work until dusk, eat, sleep, repeat. He had friends in Deer Lodge, could always find company at the saloon if he wanted it, but he'd never felt truly connected to anyone. His uncle was a good man but taciturn, more comfortable with cattle than conversation. Was he lonely? Russell had never put a name to the feeling before, that vague dissatisfaction that sometimes crept over him in the evenings, watching the sun set over the mountains. He had everything a man could want in Montana territory: good land, honest work, his health and strength. What right did he have to want more? Dawn came slowly, pale light filtering through the cracks in the shack's walls. Russell stood and stretched, his muscles stiff from the long night. He checked Amanda's clothes and found them dry or near enough. His own had dried overnight as well. He dressed quietly, then stepped outside to give Amanda privacy to do the same. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and the distant rush of the river. Russell's mare grazed nearby, unconcerned. He checked her over, making sure the river crossing hadn't injured her, then led her to the small creek that ran behind the shack for water. "Russell!" Amanda's voice came from the doorway. He turned to find her dressed in her dried clothes, her dark hair hanging loose around her shoulders. The dress was wrinkled and showed signs of its rough treatment, but she'd managed to make herself presentable. The bruise on her cheek had darkened overnight, a vivid purple mark against her pale skin. "How are you feeling?" Russell asked. "Like I was dragged down a river," Amanda said, but she smiled as she said it. "Better than yesterday, though. I can breathe without it hurting, and I don't think I have any broken bones." "That's good," Russell said. He led his mare back toward the shack. "We should head out soon. It's about an hour's ride to Deer Lodge if we take it easy." Amanda looked uncertain for the first time since he'd pulled her from the river. "Russell, I need to be honest with you. I have almost no money. My father's men took my traveling case when they caught up to our stage. I have a few coins in my pocket, enough for maybe a week's lodging if I'm careful, but then—" She spread her hands helplessly. "We'll figure something out," Russell said, echoing his words from the night before. He meant it, though he had no idea what the solution might be. "Mrs. Henderson is always looking for help at the boarding house. Maybe she'd be willing to let you work for your room and board." "I can't cook," Amanda admitted. "My father believed that's what servants were for. I can embroider, I can speak passable French, and I can navigate any social situation without making a fool of myself, but I've never made a meal in my life." Russell couldn't help but laugh at her rueful tone. "Well, you might want to learn if you're planning to make a life out west. But Mrs. Henderson doesn't just need cooks. She needs someone to clean rooms, do laundry, maybe help with her bookkeeping if you can read and write well. I can do that, Amanda said, relief evident on her face. I managed my father's social calendar for years. I know my numbers and letters. Then we have a plan, Russell said. He helped Amanda onto the mare, then swung up behind her as he'd done the day before. This time she was alert and aware, her body stiff in his arms as she tried to maintain proper distance. Relax, he said quietly. It's a long ride to stay that tense. Amanda gradually eased back, and they set off through the Montana morning. The sun climbed higher, warming the air and burning off the morning mist. They followed old game trails and cattle paths, crossing the landscape of rolling hills and scattered pines. Russell pointed out landmarks, naming mountains and describing the lay of the land. Amanda listened intently, asking questions that showed a sharp mind and genuine interest. My aunt wrote me about Montana territory, Amanda said as they crested a ridge that offered a sweeping view of the valley below. She came through on her way to San Francisco 5 years ago and said it was the most beautiful place she'd ever seen. I thought she was exaggerating, but she wasn't, was she? No, madam, Russell agreed. It gets in your blood, this country. Hard as it is, I can't imagine living anywhere else. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, then Amanda said, You must think I'm terribly foolish. Running away from home like a child. I think you're brave, Russell said honestly. It takes courage to choose your own path when everyone's telling you to follow theirs. Or stupidity, Amanda said, but her voice was lighter. I'm not sure which yet. Deer Lodge came into view around mid-morning, a collection of wooden buildings sprawled along both sides of a wide dirt street. It wasn't much compared to Philadelphia, Russell supposed, but it was home. The boarding house sat at the far end of town, a 2-story structure painted white with green shutters. Smoke rose from the chimney, and laundry flapped on a line in the side yard. Russell dismounted first, then helped Amanda down. She swayed slightly, steadying herself with a hand on his arm. Sorry, she murmured. Still a bit weak. No apology needed, Russell said. He kept a supportive hand on her elbow as they walked to the front door. Before he could knock, it swung open to reveal Martha Henderson, a stout woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Russell Irving, she said, her gaze moving from him to Amanda and back again. This is unexpected, Mrs. Henderson, Russell said respectfully. This is Miss Amanda Foster, my cousin from back east. She had some trouble on the road. Stage was robbed and she lost most of her belongings. I was hoping you might have a room available, Mrs. Henderson's expression suggested she didn't believe a word of it, but she stepped back to let them enter. Come in, then. Miss Foster, you look like you've been through the wars. When did this robbery happen? Yesterday afternoon, Amanda said, her voice steady despite the lie. Some men stopped the stage a few miles north of here. They took our bags and money. The driver managed to get away, but we were separated in the confusion. My cousin found me walking along the road. And where were you heading, Mrs. Henderson asked, leading them into a tidy parlor furnished with sturdy, practical furniture. San Francisco to visit family, Amanda said. But I'm afraid I don't have the means to continue now. I was hoping to find work here for a while, save enough to complete my journey. Mrs. Henderson studied Amanda with those keen eyes. Russell held his breath, hoping the older woman would be willing to help. Finally, Mrs. Henderson nodded. It happens more often than it should, robberies on the stage routes. You're lucky you weren't hurt, my dear. As it happens, I do need help. My regular girl ran off and got married last month, and I've been managing alone since. If you're willing to work hard, I can offer you room and board, plus a small wage. Thank you, Amanda said, and the gratitude in her voice was genuine. "I'll work very hard, I promise." "I'm sure you will," Mrs. Henderson said. "Russell, thank you for bringing your cousin safely here. I'll take good care of her." Russell understood the dismissal but found himself reluctant to leave. "I'll stop by tomorrow," he said to Amanda. "Make sure you're settling in all right." "That's kind of you," Amanda said, meeting his eyes. What passed between them in that look, Russell couldn't quite name, but it felt significant. "Thank you again for everything." Russell touched the brim of his hat and took his leave, climbing back onto his mare and heading toward his uncle's ranch. The ride gave him time to think about what he'd just done. He'd lied to Mrs. Henderson, asked Amanda to lie as well, and gotten her employment based on false pretenses. If her father's men did track her to Deer Lodge and questions were asked, people would remember that Russell had brought her into town, claimed her as family. He could be seen as complicit in whatever crime her father might accuse her of, harboring a runaway or worse. But when he pictured sending her away, telling her she was on her own, something in his chest tightened painfully. No, he'd done the right thing. Amanda deserved a chance to build a life on her own terms, and if Russell could help her do that, he would. His uncle's ranch spread across a wide valley, several thousand acres of decent grazing land. The house was modest, a solid timber structure with a wide porch and a stone chimney. Cattle dotted the hillsides, fat and healthy. It was a good operation, built over decades of hard work. Robert Irving stood in the doorway as Russell rode up, arms crossed over his broad chest. He was in his 50s, weathered and graying but still strong as an ox. "Wondered when you'd show up," he said. "You find those strays?" "Not yet," Russell admitted, dismounting. "I got delayed." "Uncle Robert, if anyone comes around asking about a woman, a stranger, you haven't seen anyone." "Understand." Robert's bushy eyebrows rose. "What have you gotten yourself into, boy?" Russell hesitated, then decided his uncle deserved the truth. He explained everything as they walked to the barn to tend to the mare. Amanda in the river, her story about running from her father, the lie he'd told Mrs. Henderson. Robert listened without interruption, his weathered face unreadable. "That's a powerful lot of trouble you've taken on," Robert said when Russell finished. "Her father's men might not take kindly to someone interfering." "I know," Russell said. "But Uncle Robert, you should have seen her face when she talked about being forced to marry some old man she doesn't even know. It wasn't right." Robert was quiet for a long moment, then he clapped a hand on Russell's shoulder. "Your mama would have done the same thing," he said gruffly. "She never could stand by when someone needed help, sense or no sense. Just be careful, you hear? Men with money have long reaches." "I will," Russell promised. That night, lying in his bed under the sloped ceiling of his small room, Russell found his thoughts returning again and again to Amanda. Was she settling in at the boarding house? Was she frightened, sleeping in a strange place so far from everything she'd known? He hoped Mrs. Henderson was being kind to her, hoped Amanda wasn't regretting her decision to run. He wondered what she was doing right now, in this very moment. Was she thinking of him, in fact? Amanda was sitting by the window in her small attic room, looking out at the stars scattered across the Montana sky. The room was simple but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small desk. It was the first space in her entire life that was truly hers, chosen by her and earned by her own promise of labor. The thought filled her with equal parts exhilaration and terror. Mrs. Henderson had been kind but firm, laying out the expectations clearly. Amanda would wake at dawn to help prepare breakfast for the guests. She'd clean rooms, change linens, help with laundry, and assist with dinner preparations. In exchange, she'd have this room, 3 meals a day, and $2 a week in wages. It wasn't much, but it was honest work and honest pay. Amanda had never worked a day in her life by these standards. Her days had been filled with music lessons and social calls, needlework, and managing household staff. She had no idea if she could actually do the work Mrs. Henderson required. But she'd promised to try, and Amanda Foster kept her promises. Her thoughts drifted to Russell Irving. He'd saved her life, protected her, lied for her to a respected woman in town. He barely knew her, had no reason to take such risks, yet he'd done so without hesitation. Amanda thought of his steady hands applying salve to her wounds, his patient explanations as they'd ridden to Deer Lodge, the warmth of his arms around her when she'd been too cold and exhausted to stay upright on the horse. She'd known men all her life, the sons of her father's business associates, the eligible bachelors paraded before her at every social function. They'd been polished and educated, wealthy and well-connected, and not one of them had made her feel the way Russell had in those brief hours they'd spent together. Safe, protected, seen. It was foolish, of course. She'd just met him, and their circumstances had been extraordinary. That intense feeling of connection was probably nothing more than gratitude mixed with the heightened emotions of her near-death experience. Russell had his own life, his own concerns. He'd helped her get to safety, and that was all she could reasonably expect. Still, he'd said he would come by tomorrow to check on her. Amanda found herself looking forward to that more than she should. Sleep eventually claimed her, and she dreamed of churning rivers and strong arms pulling her to safety. The next morning came early, announced by Mrs. Henderson's firm knock on the door. "Miss Foster, it's past 5. Time to start the day." Amanda dragged herself from bed, every muscle protesting. She was more sore today than yesterday, her body making its complaints known now that the immediate danger had passed. She dressed quickly in her wrinkled dress, the only clothing she owned, and made her way downstairs to the kitchen. Mrs. Henderson was already working, setting bread dough to rise. "Good morning, dear. There's coffee in the pot. Help yourself, then I'll show you how we do things here." The work was harder than Amanda could have imagined. Her hands, soft from a lifetime of leisure, blistered within the first hour from pumping water and scrubbing floors. Her back ached from bending over beds to tuck sheets with hospital corners. Her arms trembled from carrying heavy trays of dishes and linens. But she didn't complain, not once. Every moment of pain was a moment of freedom, bought with her own effort. The boarding house had 7 guests currently, mostly miners and 1 traveling merchant. They were rough men, loud and sometimes crude, but they were respectful enough under Mrs. Henderson's watchful eye. Amanda served them breakfast, her movements clumsy but willing, and endured their curious stares with as much grace as she could muster. "New girl?" one of the miners asked Mrs. Henderson. "She's a pretty little thing." "She's a hard worker and off limits," Mrs. Henderson said firmly. "You'll treat her with respect or find somewhere else to board." Amanda shot the older woman a grateful look and continued clearing plates. It was mid-afternoon when Russell appeared. Amanda was hanging sheets in the side yard, fighting with the wet fabric and the clothespins when she heard his voice. "Need some help with that?" She turned to find him standing at the edge of the yard, hat in hand, looking uncertain. Her heart did a strange little jump in her chest. "I'm supposed to be learning to do this myself," she said, "but honestly, yes, these sheets are determined to defeat me." Russell grinned and stepped forward, taking one end of the sheet she was struggling with. Together they got it pinned to the line. "How's your first day going?" he asked. "It's exhausting and humbling and wonderful," Amanda said honestly. She held up her reddened, blistered hands. "I'm discovering I'm not very good at manual labor." Russell's expression softened. He caught her hands gently, examining the blisters with concern. "You need to wrap these," he said. "Mrs. Henderson should have bandages. She does. She's already scolded me twice for not using them," Amanda admitted. "I keep forgetting." "Amanda," Russell said, and the way he spoke her name, gentle and concerned, made something warm bloom in her chest. "You don't have to prove anything. It's all right to take care of yourself." "I do have to prove something," Amanda said quietly. "To myself, if no one else. I need to know I can do this, that I can survive without my father's money and name." Russell studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. But let me at least help you finish hanging these sheets, all right? No sense in you suffering if there's help available." They worked together in companionable silence, and Amanda found herself intensely aware of Russell's presence. The strength in his arms as he lifted the heavy, wet fabric, the concentration on his face as he pinned the sheets in place, the way the afternoon sun caught golden highlights in his brown hair. He was handsome in a rough, unpolished way that was completely different from the men she'd known in Philadelphia. There was nothing artificial about Russell Irving, no pretense or performance. What you saw was what you got, and Amanda found that intensely appealing. "There," Russell said, pinning the last sheet. "All done. What else do you have to do today?" "Prepare vegetables for dinner, sweep the front rooms, turn down the beds," Amanda recited. "Mrs. Henderson has given me a list. I think she's waiting to see if I'll give up." "Will you?" Russell asked. "Not a chance," Amanda said firmly. Russell smiled, a genuine expression that lit up his whole face. "Good. Listen, I was thinking. Sunday is my day off generally. Would you like to take a walk, get away from the boarding house for a bit? I could show you more of Deer Lodge, maybe take you up to see the valley from the Ridge Trail." Amanda's first instinct was to say yes immediately, but she hesitated. "Is that proper? I mean, I know we said we're cousins, but people might talk." "Let them talk," Russell said with a shrug. "This isn't Philadelphia, Amanda. Out here, people are less concerned with propriety and more concerned with practicality. Besides, we're supposed to be family. It's natural I'd want to show my cousin around." "Then yes," Amanda said, unable to suppress her smile. "I'd like that very much." "It's a plan then," Russell said. He settled his hat back on his head. "Sunday, around noon, I'll come by to collect you." After Russell left, Amanda returned to her work with renewed energy despite her aching body. The thought of spending more time with him, away from the watchful eyes of the boarding house guests and Mrs. Henderson's knowing gaze, filled her with anticipation. She told herself it was just because he was familiar, the only person she really knew in Deer Lodge. It had nothing to do with the way her pulse quickened when he smiled at her, or the warmth that spread through her chest when he spoke her name. Nothing at all. The days leading up to Sunday passed in a blur of work and exhaustion. Amanda's body slowly adapted to the demands placed on it, her hands growing calluses to protect the blisters, her muscles learning the movements required for her various tasks. Mrs. Henderson proved to be a patient but exacting teacher, showing Amanda the proper way to do everything from making a bed to preparing a roast. The older woman's initial skepticism seemed to fade as Amanda proved her determination, replaced by something that might have been approval. "You're doing well, dear," Mrs. Henderson said on Saturday evening as they cleaned up after dinner. "Better than I expected, honestly. Most girls from your background wouldn't last a day doing this kind of work." Amanda looked up from the dishes she was washing, surprised. "My background, Mrs. Henderson gave her a knowing look. "I wasn't born yesterday, Miss Foster. Your hands weren't made for work. Your speech is too refined, and your manners are too polished. You're running from something, and Russell Irving is helping you. I don't know the details, and I'm not sure I want to. But I'll tell you this. Whatever you're running from, you'll have to stop eventually. You can't build a life on lies. Amanda's hand stilled in the dishwater. For a moment, she considered maintaining the fiction, but Mrs. Henderson's direct gaze demanded honesty. "You're right," she said softly. "I'm running from my father, from a marriage I don't want. Russell pulled me from the river when I was running, and he's been kind enough to help me find my feet here. But I'm not lying about wanting to work, wanting to make an honest living. That's real." "I believe you," Mrs. Henderson said. She picked up a towel and began drying the dishes Amanda had washed. "And for what it's worth, I won't turn you out. A woman has a right to choose her own path, her own husband if she wants one. But be careful, dear. Russell Irving is a good man, one of the best I know. Don't hurt him while you're figuring out what you want." The warning stung because it hit close to a fear Amanda hadn't quite acknowledged. What were her intentions toward Russell? She was attracted to him, grateful to him, drawn to his quiet strength and gentle kindness. But was that fair to him when her own future was so uncertain? When her father's men might appear any day to drag her back to Philadelphia? "I don't want to hurt him," Amanda said quietly. "Then don't," Mrs. Henderson said simply. "Now finish those dishes and get yourself to bed. Tomorrow's Sunday, and you've earned a bit of rest." Sunday morning dawned clear and beautiful, the sky a brilliant blue unmarred by clouds. Amanda helped with breakfast, then was released to prepare for her outing with Russell. She had only her one dress, but she'd washed it as best she could, and Mrs. Henderson had lent her a needle and thread to repair the worst of the damage from the river. She braided her dark hair and pinched her cheeks for color, feeling foolishly nervous. Russell arrived precisely at noon, looking freshly scrubbed and wearing what were clearly his good clothes: clean trousers, a pressed shirt, and a brown vest. He'd even shaved, revealing the strong line of his jaw. Amanda felt her breath catch slightly. "Ready?" Russell asked, offering his arm. "Ready," Amanda confirmed, placing her hand in the crook of his elbow. They walked through Deer Lodge at an easy pace, Russell pointing out various establishments and introducing Amanda to the people they passed. The mercantile owner, Mr. Garrett, tipped his hat. The blacksmith, Tom, wiped his sooty hands on his apron and welcomed Amanda to town. The minister, Reverend Walsh, expressed delight at seeing Russell with family and invited them both to services. Everyone was friendly, welcoming even, with none of the subtle snobbery that permeated Philadelphia society. Out here, Amanda realized, people were judged more by their actions than their pedigree. It was refreshing and slightly terrifying. They left the main street behind and followed a winding trail up into the hills. The path climbed steadily, and Amanda found herself breathing hard, her legs protesting the exertion. "I'm sorry," she panted, pausing to rest. "I'm slowing you down." "Not at all," Russell said easily. He didn't even seem winded. "We're not in a hurry. Take your time." They reached the ridge about 30 minutes later, and the view stole what little breath Amanda had left. The valley spread out below them, a patchwork of green and gold, with the river cutting through it like a silver ribbon. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still dusted with snow despite the warmth of late spring. The sky seemed impossibly vast, unmarred by the smoke and haze that perpetually hung over Philadelphia. "It's beautiful," Amanda breathed. "I come up here sometimes when I need to think," Russell said. He led her to a flat rock perfect for sitting, and they settled side by side, looking out over the landscape. Something about seeing it all laid out like this, it helps put problems in perspective. "What kind of problems does a cowboy have?" Amanda asked, genuinely curious. Russell was quiet for a moment, then said, "Loneliness mostly. Not being alone exactly. There's always work, always people around. But feeling alone anyway, like you're going through the motions but not really connecting with anything or anyone." Does that make sense? Yes, Amanda said softly. I spent most of my life surrounded by people, at parties and dinners and social events, and I felt lonely every single day. Like I was playing a part in a play, saying the right lines but never being real. Russell turned to look at her, and the understanding in his eyes made Amanda's heart ache. Is it better now? He asked. Being here doing real work, it's different, Amanda said. It's hard and I'm exhausted all the time, but yes, it's better. It's mine if that makes sense. My choices, my effort, my results. She looked down at her work-roughened hands. Even my blisters are mine. Russell reached over and took one of her hands in his calloused thumb tracing gently over her palm. You're incredibly brave, he said. I hope you know that. I don't feel brave, Amanda admitted. I feel terrified most of the time. What if my father finds me? What if I can't keep up with the work? What if I'm not strong enough for this life? You are, Russell said with absolute certainty. You jumped into a raging river because it was better than the alternative. You survived. You're working yourself to exhaustion learning a completely new way of life, and you haven't complained once. That's not fear talking, Amanda. That's courage. Amanda looked up at him, at his earnest face and steady eyes, and felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just gratitude she felt or the bond of shared trauma. This was something deeper, something that made her want to lean closer to close the distance between them. Russell, she said softly. Yes, thank you for everything. For saving me, for helping me, for believing in me. You don't need to thank me, Russell said, but he hadn't let go of her hand. They sat like that for a long moment, hands clasped, looking at each other. Amanda saw when Russell's gaze dropped to her lips, saw the want flash across his face before he controlled it. Her own pulse quickened in response. It would be so easy to lean in, to close the gap between them, to see if his lips were as gentle as his hands. But Mrs. Henderson's warning echoed in her mind. Don't hurt him while you're figuring out what you want. And the truth was, Amanda didn't know what she wanted beyond her immediate freedom. She hadn't thought further than escaping her father's plans, hadn't considered what kind of life she actually wanted to build. It wasn't fair to drag Russell into her uncertainty. She gently pulled her hand back, breaking the moment. We should head back, she said. Mrs. Henderson will need help with Sunday dinner. Something flickered in Russell's eyes, disappointment perhaps, but he nodded. Of course. The walk back to town was quieter. The easy companionship of earlier strained by the moment they'd both stepped back from. Amanda wanted to say something to bridge the awkwardness, but she couldn't find the right words. She'd hurt him anyway, she realized with dismay. Not by leading him on, but by pulling away. At the boarding house, Russell tipped his hat. Thank you for the walk, he said formally, the warmth from earlier gone from his voice. Russell, Amanda started, but she didn't know how to finish. I'm attracted to you, but I'm scared. I want to kiss you, but I don't know if I'm staying. Nothing sounded right. It's all right, Russell said, though his expression said it wasn't. I'll see you around, Amanda. He left before she could respond, and Amanda stood on the porch watching him go, feeling like she'd lost something precious before she'd even had a chance to hold it. The next week passed slowly. Russell didn't come by the boarding house, and Amanda told herself she had no right to miss him, no reason to watch the street hopefully every afternoon. She threw herself into her work with even more determination, learning to cook simple meals under Mrs. Henderson's patient instruction, and taking on extra tasks without being asked. The other residents of Deer Lodge were gradually accepting her as part of the community. She chatted with the other women at the mercantile, exchanged pleasantries with the miners who boarded at Mrs. Henderson's, and even attended Sunday service at the small church. Reverend Walsh's sermon was simple and heartfelt, nothing like the ornate performances she'd endured in Philadelphia's Grand Cathedral. She found she preferred it, but through it all, she thought about Russell. About his kind eyes and gentle hands, his quiet strength and the loneliness he'd confessed to. She remembered the way he'd looked at her on that ridge, like she was something precious, and she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake in pulling away. It was Mrs. Henderson who finally broached the subject 10 days after the walk. They were preparing bread for the next day, kneading dough at the kitchen table. "You're moping," the older woman said bluntly. "I am not," Amanda protested. "Yes, you are. And Russell Irving hasn't been by in over a week, which is odd considering he was here nearly every day before your Sunday outing. Want to tell me what happened?" Amanda focused intently on her dough. "Nothing happened. We walked, we talked, we came back. And I think he wanted to kiss me, and I pulled away because I don't know what I want and it wouldn't be fair to him." The words came out in a rush. Mrs. Henderson was quiet for a moment, working her own dough. "Do you care for him?" "I barely know him," Amanda said. "That's not what I asked." Amanda sighed. "Yes, I care for him. He's kind and strong and good, and when I'm with him, I feel safe. But Mrs. Henderson, my life is such a mess. My father could show up any day to drag me back to Philadelphia. I have no money, no prospects, no idea what I'm doing with my life beyond surviving day to day. What do I have to offer someone like Russell?" "Maybe you should ask him what he thinks about that," Mrs. Henderson said. "Men generally prefer to make up their own minds about such things." "What if I hurt him?" Amanda asked quietly. "What if you don't?" Mrs. Henderson countered. "What if you both miss out on something wonderful because you're too scared to try? Life is uncertain, dear. It always has been, always will be. If you wait until everything is perfect and secure before taking a chance, you'll wait forever." Amanda thought about that as she shaped her dough into loaves. Was she being cautious or cowardly, protecting Russell or protecting herself? She didn't have answers, but she knew she couldn't keep going like this, wondering and regretting. The decision was taken out of her hands the following afternoon. Amanda was sweeping the front porch when 3 men rode into town. They were well dressed by frontier standards, wearing suits that were dusty from travel but clearly expensive. They carried themselves with the arrogance of men used to getting their way. Amanda's blood ran cold. She recognized the type even if she didn't recognize the individuals. Her father's men, investigators or hired muscle brought from back east. They were asking questions. She could see, stopping people on the street and showing something, probably a photograph or description. She backed into the boarding house, her heart hammering. Mrs. Henderson looked up from her mending, took one look at Amanda's face and set her work aside. "What is it, my father's men?" Amanda whispered. "They're here." Mrs. Henderson stood, her expression grim. "Upstairs, quickly. Go to your room and don't come down until I call you." Amanda fled upstairs on shaking legs. From her attic window, she could see the men working their way down the street. They were being thorough, checking every establishment. It was only a matter of time before they reached the boarding house. She heard the knock on the door, heard Mrs. Henderson's calm voice answering. Amanda pressed herself against the wall beside the window, trying to hear the conversation below. "We're looking for a young woman," one of the men said, his voice carrying up through the floorboards. "About 22, dark hair, amber eyes. Her name is Amanda Foster, and she ran away from her family. We have reason to believe she came through Deer Lodge." "I'm sorry, gentlemen, but I can't help you," Mrs. Henderson said smoothly. "I haven't seen anyone matching that description." "You're sure?" "Her father is very worried, willing to pay a substantial reward for information leading to her safe return." "I'm quite sure," Mrs. Henderson said firmly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have dinner to prepare." Amanda heard the door close, but she could see from her window that the men hadn't left town. They were conferring in the street, then split up, continuing their inquiries. One headed toward the saloon, another toward the church. The third remained on the main street watching. They were going to find her. It was only a matter of time before someone remembered seeing Russell with a woman matching her description, before the cousin's story was questioned, before someone decided that reward was worth more than protecting a stranger. Amanda had to leave. Tonight, under cover of darkness, before they tightened their net. But where would she go? She had no horse, almost no money, and no knowledge of the country beyond Deer Lodge. Running blindly would just get her lost or killed, unless she had help. Amanda waited until dusk, until Mrs. Henderson called her down for dinner. The boarding house guests were already at table, but Mrs. Henderson pulled Amanda aside. "They're still in town," she said quietly, "asking questions. So far, everyone's been close-mouthed, but dear, I think you need to seriously consider your options." "I know," Amanda said. "Mrs. Henderson, I need to ask you a favor. Can you get a message to Russell? Tell him I need his help." The older woman studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll send one of the boys. You stay inside, out of sight." Russell arrived after dark, slipping in through the kitchen door. Amanda had been pacing her room for hours, and she practically flew down the stairs when Mrs. Henderson called her. Russell stood in the kitchen, his expression serious, and Amanda's heart clenched at the sight of him. "Amanda," he said, "Mrs. Henderson told me I saw those men in town." "I'm so sorry," Amanda said. "I shouldn't have stayed. I've put you and Mrs. Henderson in danger." "Stop," Russell said firmly. He crossed the kitchen and took her hands. "This isn't your fault. You have nothing to apologize for." "They'll find me," Amanda said, her voice breaking. "They'll make me go back." "Not if we move first," Russell said. He looked at Mrs. Henderson. "My uncle's ranch. We could hide her there for a while, at least until those men move on." "That's the first place they'll look once they connect you to her," Mrs. Henderson pointed out. "Then we'll have to make sure they don't make that connection," Russell said. He turned back to Amanda. "Can you ride?" "I've had lessons," Amanda said. "English saddle in riding rings." "I've never actually ridden any real distance." "It'll have to do," Russell said. "We'll leave before dawn, take the back trails to my uncle's place. You'll stay there out of sight until we figure out a more permanent solution." "Russell, you've done so much already," Amanda protested. "I can't ask you to risk more." "You're not asking," Russell said. His hands tightened on hers. "I'm offering. Amanda, these past few days without seeing you, I've been miserable. I know you're scared, I know your life is uncertain, but I don't care. I want to help you. I want to be there for you. If you'll let me." Amanda looked up at him, at the determination and tenderness in his eyes, and felt the last of her resistance crumble. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care so much?" Russell raised one hand to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing gently across her skin. "Because when I pulled you from that river, when I looked into your eyes, something in me recognized something in you. Two lonely people finding each other in the middle of nowhere. That's not chance, Amanda. That's fate." "I don't believe in fate," Amanda said, but her voice wavered. "Maybe not," Russell said softly, "but I think you believe in this, in us." He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. Amanda didn't. She rose on her toes to meet him, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but it quickly deepened. Amanda's hands came up to grip Russell's shoulders, and his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Amanda rested her forehead against Russell's chest. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "So am I," Russell said, "but I'd rather be terrified with you than safe and alone." Mrs. Henderson cleared her throat, reminding them they weren't alone. "That's very sweet," she said dryly, "but perhaps we could focus on the practical matter of keeping Miss Foster from being discovered and dragged back east." Russell grinned, not letting go of Amanda. "Right. Here's the plan." They spent the next hour working out details. Mrs. Henderson would tell anyone who asked that Amanda had quit without notice, run off with one of the traveling merchants who'd been staying at the boarding house. It was the kind of scandal that would spread quickly, and with any luck, would send Amanda's father's men chasing in the wrong direction. Russell would take Amanda to his uncle's ranch, where she could stay in the small cabin they used during calving season. It was a fair distance from the main house, secluded, and little used this time of year. Robert Irving could be trusted to keep silent, especially once Russell explained the situation. As for the long term, well, they'd figure that out as they went. Amanda managed to sleep a few hours, and Russell woke her well before dawn. She dressed quickly, putting on the split riding skirt that Mrs. Henderson had mysteriously produced from somewhere. It was worn but serviceable, far more practical than her dress for what lay ahead. They crept down the back stairs and out to the small barn behind the boarding house where Russell had stabled 2 horses. His mare, familiar and steady, and a smaller gelding that Mrs. Henderson apparently kept for errands. "He's gentle," Russell assured Amanda as he helped her mount. "Just follow my lead and you'll be fine." They set out in the pre-dawn darkness, moving quietly through the sleeping town. Amanda's heart pounded with every step the horse took, certain that someone would see them, would raise an alarm. But Deer Lodge slept on, undisturbed. Once clear of town, Russell led them onto a narrow trail that climbed into the hills. The going was slow in the darkness, the horses picking their way carefully over uncertain terrain. Amanda clung to the saddle, trying to find the rhythm of the horse's gait. Her muscles, just beginning to adapt to the work at the boarding house, protested this new demand. Dawn broke as they crested a ridge, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Russell called a brief halt, letting the horses rest and giving Amanda a chance to stretch her aching legs. They shared water from his canteen and strips of jerky from his saddlebags. "How are you holding up?" Russell asked. "Everything hurts," Amanda admitted, "but I'm all right." "How much further?" "A few hours yet," Russell said. "We're taking the long way, avoiding the main roads. Can you make it?" "I don't have much choice, do I?" Amanda said, but she tried to smile. "Besides, I survived the river. I can survive a horseback ride." They continued on, the sun climbing higher and the day growing warm. Amanda discovered muscles she didn't know she possessed, each one making its discomfort known. But she gritted her teeth and kept going, following Russell through landscapes that shifted from pine forest to open meadow and back again. It was late morning when they finally descended into a wide valley where cattle grazed peacefully. In the distance, Amanda could see a cluster of buildings, a house, a barn, several smaller structures. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house. "That's home," Russell said, and there was pride in his voice. "Come on, let's get you settled before the hands see us." He led her past the main house to a small cabin tucked into a grove of aspen trees. It was simple but solid, one room with a stone fireplace, a bunk, a table and chairs. Supplies lined shelves on one wall, canned goods, flour, coffee, other staples. "It's not much," Russell said, helping Amanda down from her horse. She nearly collapsed when her feet hit the ground, her legs refusing to support her. Russell caught her easily, sweeping her up into his arms. "Easy there. You've been in the saddle for hours. You need to rest." He carried her inside and set her gently on the bunk. Amanda wanted to protest that she could walk, that she was fine, but the truth was she felt like a wrung-out dish rag. "Thank you," she murmured. "I'm going to take care of the horses and let my uncle know you're here," Russell said. Don't try to get up until your legs remember how to work. I'll be back soon with some proper food." He left, and Amanda lay back on the bunk, staring up at the rough-hewn beams of the ceiling. She'd done it. She'd escaped her father's men, at least for now. But at what cost to Russell, to Mrs. Henderson, to everyone who'd helped her? The door opened again, and Amanda sat up quickly, reaching for a skillet on the nearby shelf as a weapon. But it was Russell, carrying a basket. "Just me," he said, amused. "Though I'm glad to see you're prepared to defend yourself with cookware. My uncle sent food, fresh bread, cheese, some of yesterday's stew. He wants to meet you later, says anyone who's got my head this turned around must be quite something." Amanda felt her cheeks heat. "I've turned your head around, completely," Russell said without embarrassment. He set the basket on the table and began unpacking it. "Amanda, I know this is all happening fast. We've known each other less than 2 weeks, but I need you to know that I'm serious about this, about us. I'm not helping you because I pity you or because I'm looking for gratitude. I'm helping you because I can't seem to help myself, because you matter to me." Amanda rose on shaky legs and crossed to where he stood. She placed her hands on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. "You matter to me too," she said softly. "I've never felt this way about anyone. It terrifies me." "Good terrified or bad terrified?" Russell asked, covering her hands with his. "Both," Amanda admitted. "Russell, my father is a powerful man with powerful friends. If he finds out you helped me, he could make things very difficult for you. And there's so much we don't know about each other. What if I'm not who you think I am? What if this feeling doesn't last? Then we'll deal with it," Russell said simply. "But I'd rather take the risk and see where this goes than spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been." "Wouldn't you?" Amanda thought about that, about the life she'd left behind and the uncertain future ahead. She thought about Russell pulling her from the river, his gentle hands tending her wounds, the way he looked at her like she was brave instead of foolish. She thought about the loneliness in his voice when he'd talked about going through the motions without really connecting. She'd been lonely too, for so long, surrounded by people but feeling utterly alone. And then Russell had appeared, steady and kind and true, and suddenly the world didn't feel quite so empty. "Yes," she said. "I'd rather take the risk." Russell's answering smile was like sunrise, bright and warm and full of promise. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, slow and deep, and Amanda melted into him. This was right, she thought. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them together. Over the following days, Amanda settled into life at the cabin. Robert Irving came to visit that first evening, a gruff, weathered man with keen eyes that reminded Amanda of his nephew. He shook her hand firmly and said, "You've caused quite a stir, Miss Foster. But any woman brave enough to jump in the Yellowstone River and stubborn enough to work at Martha Henderson's boarding house is welcome on my land. You'll stay here as long as you need." "Thank you, Mr. Irving," Amanda said, touched by the simple acceptance. "I don't want to cause trouble for your family." "Trouble finds its way in regardless," Robert said with a shrug. "Might as well make sure it's the right kind of trouble. Russell, you'll need to be careful going into town for a while. Those investigators are still asking questions." Russell had indeed been careful, staying mostly at the ranch and sending ranch hands into Deer Lodge for supplies. Word filtered back slowly. Amanda's father's men were frustrated, finding no trace of the runaway heiress. The story Mrs. Henderson had spread about Amanda running off with the merchant was accepted, and the search gradually shifted to other towns, other territories. But Amanda couldn't shake the feeling that she was living on borrowed time. Her father wasn't the type to give up easily, and eventually, someone would remember Russell bringing a woman to town, would question the cousin's story, would put pieces together. She shared these fears with Russell one evening as they sat by the fire in the cabin. He'd taken to spending his evenings with her after finishing the day's work, and Amanda treasured those hours. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's histories and preferences, dreams and fears. "So what do we do?" Russell asked when Amanda voiced her concerns. "You can't hide here forever. Eventually, someone will notice you." "I could leave," Amanda said quietly. "Keep running, maybe make it to San Francisco like I originally planned." Russell was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "Is that what you want?" "I don't know what I want," Amanda admitted, "except that I don't want to leave you." Russell turned to her, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "Then don't marry me." Amanda's breath caught. "What? Marry me?" Russell repeated, moving to kneel in front of where she sat. He took her hands in his. "I know it's fast. I know we're still learning each other, but Amanda, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. You've brought light to places in me I'd forgotten existed. You make me want to be better, braver, more than I am. And as my wife, you'd be protected. Your father couldn't force you to go back, couldn't force you to marry that man. You'd be free to build the life you want here with me." Amanda's heart felt too large for her chest. "Russell, I have nothing. No dowry, no connections. Nothing to bring to a marriage except trouble and work-worn hands." "I don't want your dowry," Russell said. "I want you. Your courage, your stubbornness, your smile, your spirit. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to build a life together, face whatever comes together. Say yes, Amanda. Please say yes." Amanda looked into his eyes, seeing the love there, the sincerity, the hope. She thought about the life her father had planned for her, cold and constrained, a gilded cage. And she thought about what Russell was offering, freedom and partnership, love and possibility. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Russell's whoop of joy echoed through the cabin. He surged up and swept Amanda into his arms, spinning her around. She laughed, giddy with happiness and terror and hope all mixed together. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, and Amanda poured everything she felt into that kiss: gratitude and desire, affection and promise. They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Deer Lodge. Reverend Walsh performed the service with Robert Irving and Martha Henderson as witnesses. Amanda wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her make from fabric purchased at the mercantile. Russell wore his Sunday best, and the love shining in his eyes as he said his vows made Amanda feel beautiful despite her simple attire. There was no grand reception, no elaborate feast, just a quiet dinner at the ranch house with Robert and a few of the hands. But Amanda had never been happier. She was Amanda Irving now, wife to a good man, member of a community that had accepted her, free to live life on her own terms. Their wedding night was spent in the cabin, and Russell was gentle and patient, making sure Amanda felt cherished and safe. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Amanda felt peace for the first time she could remember. "Happy," Russell murmured, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. "Impossibly so," Amanda said. "Russell, do you really think this will work? That my father will accept I'm married and leave me alone?" "I think he won't have much choice," Russell said. "You're a married woman now, legally. You're my responsibility, not his. And if he does send men back, we'll deal with it together." "You're not alone anymore, Amanda. You'll never be alone again." Amanda tipped her head up to kiss him. "Neither will you," she promised. "No more loneliness for either of us." The weeks that followed their marriage settled into a comfortable rhythm. Amanda learned the skills she needed for ranch life under the patient instruction of Russell and Robert. She discovered she had a talent for working with horses, a gentle touch, that the animals responded to. She learned to cook more elaborate meals, to preserve food for the winter, to mend clothes and manage a household. It was hard work, harder than anything she'd done at the boarding house, but it was satisfying in a way her old life had never been. Every blister earned, every skill mastered, was proof that she could do this, that she belonged in this life she'd chosen. Russell bloomed under the attention of a wife, becoming more open and expressive. The quiet loneliness that had shadowed him faded, replaced by contentment. He loved showing Amanda every corner of the ranch, sharing his knowledge of the land and the cattle, making plans for their future. Summer deepened into fall, and there was no word from Amanda's father or his investigators. It seemed the trail had truly gone cold, and Amanda began to relax, to believe that perhaps she really was free. Then, on a crisp October morning, a well-dressed man rode up to the ranch house. Amanda saw him from the window where she was kneading bread and felt her blood run cold. She recognized the cut of that coat, the quality of that horse. This was someone from her old life. Russell had been out with the herd, but he came riding hard when one of the hands alerted him to the visitor. He burst into the house to find Amanda standing frozen in the kitchen, white-faced and trembling. "It's all right," Russell said, pulling her into his arms. "Whatever this is, we'll face it together." "Remember," Amanda nodded, drawing strength from his solid presence. Together, they went out to face the visitor. The man was older, perhaps 60, with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. He removed his hat as they approached. "Mr. Irving, Mrs. Irving," he said with a small bow. "My name is Charles Whitmore. I'm an attorney from Philadelphia, representing Mr. Gerald Foster." "My father sent a lawyer," Amanda said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Indeed," Mr. Whitmore said. "May we speak inside? I've come a long way with information I believe you'll want to hear." They brought him into the parlor, and Mrs. Whitmore accepted coffee but declined food. He set a leather portfolio on the table and regarded Amanda with an expression that might have been sympathy. "Miss Foster, or rather, Mrs. Irving, your father has asked me to convey several things. First, his relief that you're safe and well. The reports from the investigators were concerning, suggesting you might have drowned or come to harm. Learning that you survived and have married has brought him great comfort." Amanda exchanged a skeptical glance with Russell. "Forgive me, Mr. Whitmore, but my father sent men to drag me back to Philadelphia against my will. I find it hard to believe he's simply relieved." "Your father's methods were perhaps heavy-handed," Mr. Whitmore conceded, "but his concern was genuine. You disappeared without word, and he feared the worst. However, circumstances have changed significantly since you left Philadelphia." He opened his portfolio and withdrew several papers. "Cyrus Worthington, the man your father intended you to marry, has been arrested for fraud and embezzlement. It seems his railroad empire was built on deception and stolen funds. He'll be in prison for many years, and his assets have been seized. Your father has written to express his regret for ever considering such a match." Amanda sat back, stunned. Russell's hand found hers, squeezing supportively. Mr. Whitmore continued, "Furthermore, your father wishes me to convey that he's had time to reflect on his actions and desires. He recognizes that his attempt to control your life was wrong. He asks, not for your forgiveness, as he feels he doesn't deserve it, but for the opportunity to eventually rebuild a relationship with you on your terms." He placed several more papers on the table. "These documents establish a trust in your name. Your mother's inheritance, which was to be held until your 30th birthday, has been released early. It's yours, Mrs. Irving, to do with as you wish. The amount is substantial, enough to ensure your security and comfort for life. Your father asks nothing in return. Amanda picked up the papers with shaking hands, scanning the legal language. The numbers swam before her eyes. This was real. She was independently wealthy, beholden to no one. "There's one more thing," Mr. Whitmore said gently. "Your father is dying, Mrs. Irving. A cancer, the doctors say. He has perhaps a year, maybe less. He hopes that you might find it in your heart to write to him, perhaps even visit before the end. But he understands if you cannot. He says he's earned whatever anger you hold toward him." Silence fell over the parlor. Amanda stared at the papers, at the evidence of her father's regret and mortality, and felt a complicated tangle of emotions. Anger at the years of control, the attempt to marry her off like property. Relief that she was truly free, that her marriage was safe and secure. And beneath it all, a deep sadness for the relationship she'd never had with her father and now likely never would. "I need time to think," Amanda said finally. "This is all very sudden." "Of course," Mr. Whitmore said. He stood, preparing to leave. "I'm staying at the boarding house in Deer Lodge for a few days. If you have questions or wish to send a response to your father, you can find me there. Mrs. Irving, Mr. Irving, I wish you both happiness. From what I've seen, you've built a good life here." After he left, Amanda and Russell sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Russell said, "What do you want to do?" "I don't know," Amanda said honestly. She looked at the papers again, at the freedom they represented. "My father is dying. I should feel something more than this numbness." "You feel what you feel," Russell said. "There's no should about it. He tried to control your life, Amanda. You're allowed to be angry even now." "I am angry," Amanda said. "But I'm also sad. Sad for what could have been if he'd just listened to me, respected my choices. And I'm relieved that I don't have to hide anymore, that we can really build a life without looking over our shoulders." Russell pulled her close, and Amanda buried her face in his chest. "We already have a life," he murmured. "This just makes it easier. Whatever you decide about your father, I'm with you. We're partners, remember." Over the next few days, Amanda wrestled with her decision. She discussed it with Russell, with Robert, even with Mrs. Henderson when they visited town. Everyone was supportive of whatever choice she made. In the end, Amanda decided to write to her father. Not a long letter, not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. She told him about her life in Montana, about Russell and the ranch, about the work she did, and the person she was becoming. She told him she was happy, that she'd found where she belonged. And she told him that while she couldn't forget what he'd tried to do, she was willing to correspond, to try to build some kind of peace between them before he died. It wasn't much, but it was what she could offer. As winter approached, Amanda and Russell settled more deeply into their life together. The trust from her mother's inheritance gave them options they hadn't had before. They could expand the ranch, buy more cattle, hire additional hands, but they were in no rush. The money sat safely in the bank in Deer Lodge, a safety net against hard times, but not something that defined their daily lives. Amanda discovered she was pregnant in early December. The realization came gradually, missed courses and morning nausea finally adding up to an inescapable conclusion. She told Russell one evening by the fire, nervous about his reaction. His face lit up with wonder and joy. "A baby," he repeated. "We're having a baby, apparently so," Amanda said, laughing at his expression. "Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Russell said. He pulled her into his arms, holding her with exquisite gentleness, as if she might break. "Amanda, you've given me everything I ever wanted and 1,000 things I didn't know I needed. I'm going to be a father. We're going to be a family." "We already are a family," Amanda pointed out, but she was smiling. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter. Amanda continued working as long as she was able, stubbornly refusing to be treated as fragile despite Russell's hovering. The community rallied around them, the women of Deer Lodge showering Amanda with advice and hand-sewn baby clothes. Mrs. Henderson became a regular visitor, checking on Amanda's health and teaching her what to expect during labor and delivery. Letters arrived from Philadelphia, responses to the note Amanda had sent her father. They were brief and formal at first, but gradually became more personal as her father shared memories of Amanda's mother, expressed regret for his mistakes, and conveyed genuine interest in Amanda's life. She wrote back regularly, and slowly, carefully, they built a fragile bridge between the past and present. In late May, as the Montana landscape burst into spring growth, Amanda went into labor. The birth was long and difficult, and there were moments when Russell, pacing anxiously outside the bedroom where Mrs. Henderson and the doctor attended his wife, feared he would lose her. But Amanda was strong, stronger than anyone had given her credit for, and just after dawn on a beautiful morning, she delivered a healthy baby boy. Russell held his son for the first time with shaking hands, overwhelmed by the tiny perfection of him. "What should we name him?" he asked Amanda, who lay exhausted but radiant in bed. "Robert," Amanda said without hesitation. "After your uncle who gave us a home when I needed one, Robert Irving, Jr." Russell's eyes stung with sudden tears. "He'd be honored," he managed. "Amanda, thank you." "For him, for giving me a family, for everything." "Thank you for pulling me from the river," Amanda said softly, "for saving my life and filling it with love." The years that followed were full and rich. Little Robert grew into a sturdy, adventurous boy with his father's steady temperament and his mother's amber eyes. 2 more children followed, a daughter they named Martha after Mrs. Henderson, and another son they called William. The ranch prospered under Russell's management and Amanda's business acumen. She'd taken charge of the books and finances, discovering a talent for organization and planning that served them well. They expanded gradually, buying adjacent land when it became available, building a larger house to accommodate their growing family while keeping the original ranch house for Robert Sr., who remained a vital part of their lives until his peaceful death at 70. Amanda received word of her father's death when Robert Jr. was 3 years old. The letter from Mr. Whitmore was gentle, including a final note her father had written to her before the end. In it, he thanked her for the gift of their correspondence, said he was proud of the woman she'd become, and expressed his only regret was not supporting her dreams from the beginning. He asked her to be happy, to give her children the freedom he'd denied her. Amanda cried over that letter, mourning not the father she'd had, but the one she might have known if things had been different. But she took his final advice to heart, raising her children to make their own choices, follow their own paths, be their own people. She never regretted jumping into the Yellowstone River that desperate day, never looked back with longing at the life she'd left behind. Everything that mattered was here. Russell's steady love, their children's laughter, the wide Montana sky, the land they worked and nurtured together. On summer evenings when the work was done and the children were asleep, Amanda and Russell would sit on the porch of their home, hands clasped, watching the sun set over the mountains. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, but always there was the sense of contentment of having found exactly where they belonged. "You ever think about how we met?" Russell asked one such evening, their 20th anniversary approaching. "Every day," Amanda said. "I think about being in that river, certain I was going to die, and then your hand reaching down, pulling me up. You saved my life, Russell." "And you saved mine," Russell said, raising her hand to kiss her knuckles. "I was drowning in loneliness long before you fell in that river, Amanda." I just didn't know it until I had you to compare it to. You brought life and love and purpose to my world. You rescued me from empty days and emptier nights." "I think we rescued each other," Amanda said softly. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "The cowboy rescued me from the river, but I rescued him from loneliness. And together, we rescued each other from lives half-lived." "Together," Russell agreed, his arm coming around her shoulders. "Always together." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they sat wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for the chance meeting that had changed everything. Two lonely souls had found each other in the wilds of Montana Territory, and in finding each other, had discovered home. Their children grew and thrived. Robert Jr. took over the ranch when Russell decided to step back, managing it with the same steady competence his father had shown. Martha became a teacher in Deer Lodge, educating the next generation with patience and kindness. William, the adventurous one, became a surveyor, mapping the growing Montana Territory but always returning home for holidays and celebrations. Russell and Amanda grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They watched Montana Territory become Montana State, saw Deer Lodge grow from a rough frontier town into a proper community with schools and churches and bustling commerce. The land they loved changed and developed, but the essential character remained, wild and beautiful and free. When Amanda was 67, she fell ill with pneumonia. Despite the doctor's best efforts, her lungs, weakened by that long ago near drowning in the Yellowstone River, couldn't fight off the infection. She died peacefully in her sleep, Russell holding her hand, their children and grandchildren surrounding them. Russell mourned her deeply, feeling the return of that loneliness he'd lived with before Amanda burst into his life. But it wasn't the same empty feeling as before. He'd been blessed with 47 years of love and partnership, and Amanda lived on in their children, their grandchildren, the life they'd built together. He lived 3 more years after Amanda's passing, long enough to see his great-grandchildren born, to pass the family stories down one more generation. On a summer evening much like the ones he'd spent with Amanda, Russell Irving passed away quietly in his sleep, and those who knew him said he died with a smile on his face. They buried him next to Amanda on a hillside overlooking the ranch, where the mountains stretched to the horizon, and the river wound through the valley like a silver thread. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and dates, and beneath, an inscription chosen by their children. Together they found home. Together they found love. Together they found each other. The ranch remained in the family for generations, the story of how it all began passed down like a treasured heirloom. The cowboy who pulled a desperate woman from the river, and the woman who pulled that same cowboy from a loneliness he hadn't known how to escape. Two people who saved each other and, in doing so, built a legacy of love that endured long after they were gone. And in Deer Lodge, Montana, where their story began, people still talked about Russell and Amanda Irving, about the courage it took to leap into an unknown future, and the grace required to build a life together from nothing but love and determination. Their tale became part of the town's history, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, and that true love, when you're lucky enough to find it, can save you in ways you never imagined.